Locked On Texans, your daily Houston Texans podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into a Friday edition of the Locked On Texans podcast. I am Johnson Sports Guy Hickman. Thank you for making the Locked On Texans podcast your first listen every day. We are free and available on all major platforms and including YouTube. As always, to my side, Cody M. Davis talking about the Houston Texans. Go ahead and get them folks to run down. Let's get started.
Yes, sir. And as you guys know, it's a Friday installment of Locked On Texans, which means we got our guy, Mr. B. Scott Brandon from Sports Radio 610, as we talk about everything that went on last week regarding the Houston Texans, especially the performance from Davis Mills. What is he expecting for this upcoming week in the game against the Indianapolis Colts? And then, of course, got to get his ideas and his takeaways about some of these trade rumors that we are starting to hear. But ladies and gentlemen, we promised this early on in the week, but of course, the trade rumors surrounding Lonnie Johnson Jr. kind of threw us off schedule a little bit. But John still want to give you listeners and you viewers, he still want to let you guys hear your voices and your opinions here on Locked On Texans.
Absolutely, Coach. The first one is actually to you. I'm looking at. Are we able to say their names?
Yeah, you have to.
Okay, we're looking at Oscar Cruz. And this was under the missed opportunity, how much the Meltdown in H-Town episode that we did under the YouTube comment. Oscar Cruz said, I really like y'all's show. I have a two-part question. Cody, you actually go to Texans Live coaches and interviews, right? If yes, why don't you ask the coaches some of the things you say on the podcast? And before I pass it over, I think a lot of times we do. There's a lot of information that we're not able to kind of always dive into for the show at times, but I'll go ahead and let you take that over, Cody.
Yeah, we actually do. You know, it's not only me, it's the rest of the Houston Texans beat reporters that you guys see as well. And we ask them every single question that we have on our mind, you know, the good, the bad, and the extremely ugly. But we recorded that, 2 hours after the loss against the New England Patriots. And there's one thing I would say, it's better if we ask those questions, and sometimes we still do. We ask them throughout the week because especially after a loss like they took on Sunday where they had the lead, they blew the lead, and they end up on the wrong side of the scoreboard. At the end of the day, they're just human. So their mind is just racing, and we throwing like millions and billions of questions at them. A lot of times they don't give us what we want, and that's why not just myself, but a lot of people, even the ones with the most sources and relationships within the organization, they still don't know what's going on. So that's part of the reason why, like I say, throughout the week, we'll still ask them and stuff. But a lot of times, and rightfully so, to a certain extent, these teams like to keep a lot of their stuff in-house.
I also want to look at the comments that was made under is Houston Texans quarterback Davis Mills the best of the 2021 NFL
Oh, Lord.
And that was a lot, but specifically for on YouTube, his name is Front Runner. He mentions one good game and y'all ready to give him the keys. Y'all funny as hell. Now let me go ahead and take that if you don't mind.
One good game? One?
He had a good game against the New England Patriots, but it's not about more so the good games he's had. Let's look at the bad games everybody else has had. Now, Everybody is giving Mac Jones right now the number one quarterback out of this draft class. And we mentioned Mac Jones on this show. We said Mac Jones right now would be number one. I have personally said, aside of the game against the Texans and some flashes both between the Texans and Buccaneers game, Mac Jones hasn't overly impressed me. Okay, like he's doing everybody else in the media, which I think is I think he's purposely being a media darling for purposes of Tom Brady air. Okay, but if we're looking at everybody else in this draft class, Zach Wilson has stunk it up. I mean, okay. Fields is in a weird position because of his situation in Chicago. However, Justin Fields and Davis Mills got starts after the starting quarterback went down. And from those games on, Davis Mills has looked better, especially considering what he did on Sunday. Okay. Mills looked good for about a quarter and a half against Carolina. And I also think, as we found out, the coaches apologized for that loss, and his performance, rather, and with the offense was more so on them and handcuffing him. And then Trevor Lawrence is 0-4 right now in Jacksonville, and they got a whole bunch of mess going on. And so Trey Lance in his situation, again, he's playing more now because of Jimmy Garoppolo, but he's also facing, I don't think he may play on Sunday. So
yeah, I don't think he is. I think he got some kind of knee issue going on there.
Right. So it's fair to say that the conversation around who's been the better quarterback right now, you're going to give it to Mac Jones, but then right under him, who else would you choose? I'm going with Davis Mills. The rest of the quarterbacks, Zach Wilson, Trevor Lawrence, they've started since day one for their respective teams. And Zach Wilson, as we mentioned, he hasn't been good whatsoever. Aside of that Buffalo game, and that Buffalo Bill team just put a hurting on that Kansas City team, okay? So aside of that game, Davis Mills has 5 touchdowns and 1 interception.
And by the way, and I do also want to mention, since Davis Mills took over for Tyrod Taylor in the second half of that Cleveland game, he has thrown for the most passing yards as well. He has had a higher passer rating, and it's the numbers prove it, the film prove it. And look, at the end of the day, all of these quarterbacks, with the exception of Davis Mills, they have been pretty bad, and they've been a big disappointment as well. And when you take a look at Davis Mills and you take a look at what he has been able to do, by the way, I believe Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson should be further along in their progression because they've been starting since the opening day of OTAs. And the fact that those two guys, especially Zach Wilson, has not looked better than Davis Mills, that is
Zach
saying
Wilson
a lot.
He never had competition. I mean, even in Jacksonville, that was Urban Meyer. Zach Wilson never had competition at his spot. Okay. And so we're not giving him the keys. That's not what we're saying. But one thing that I do believe in, we've talked about it before on and off camera, his performance against the New England Patriots gave him another game, which Tyrod Taylor, I think, is trending upward to being healthy. And if Houston was in a position where they could possibly be behind half a game or a game behind for first place of this division, and Tyrod Taylor's healthy, he would probably play this week. But Davis Mills' performance earned him another game. We're not giving him the keys. We're simply saying, look around. You take your pick of the litter. And if you're going with guys like Zach Wilson, you're doing it off name. If you're going with Trevor Lawrence right now, not for what you potentially think, but right now, when we had that show, you're going off name. The last one is, well, not the last one, but I guess we can keep it short and then continue on for next Friday's show. I would go with, because I had a few, man. I'm going to go with this one. This was under the, is it fair to say Deshaun Watson quit, which is one of our highest. And I picked the clean one too, because some of those comments, YouTube was like, "No, y'all ain't gonna even." By the way,
I do want to mention on Wednesday, I had an opportunity to see Deshaun Watson work out on the practice field. He was still working out by himself. He was sitting there working out. I think it was with 2 team trainers or whatever. Man, I just wanted to mention that because every time I feel like I'm ready to let go, I will see him, and I just feel like, man, I just think back to all the great memories, and it's just like, man, I'm not ready yet, John and listeners. I'm sorry.
Well, some folks are ready, but this was our highest watched and viewed show, and we are Texans #Red Nation commenting. Watson did quit, but in my opinion, it all began on the top. When Cal said he's keeping Jack Easterby, despite the fact that the majority of the people in the locker room, in the media, and the fans wanted him gone. He still decided to keep Easterby, and Watson didn't want to be a part of an organization that stubborn. I wish Watson can play. I wish he could just make things up with the front office and at least give it a chance with Caserio and Cully at the same time. I couldn't blame him because that front office is indeed toxic, and it all begins with Cal and Easterby. JJ didn't want to be a part of it, and he left town as soon as he got an opportunity to do so. Watson is simply doing the same thing. Should he play? Yes. It will increase his trade value and the value of what this team can get in return. At the same time, I believe it's the Texans organization that failed Deshaun Watson. And I think this is one of those comments and feelings that echo throughout millions of fans for this team right now. The fans are looking at Houston as an organization as the villains. You caused this. And a lot of fans I've read or I've talked to, whether they've been on Twitter, whether they've been in articles, whether they've been on the streets, wherever I'm at, a lot of fans feel like with the amount of issues that Deshaun Watson is going through right now, the organization aided in that as well. So they're still looked at as the villain instead of getting help and watching what's going on with their star quarterback who they just signed to that mega extension, will place him the second highest quarterback in the league when that extension kicked in. To your comment, I don't know if it's – so you're going to place blame on Cal, right? Because of the whole Jack Easterby situation, because of how everything was handled, because when you look around that organization, not at the locker room, because we get caught up in that locker room sometimes, Cody, I'm going to move on quickly. We get caught up in that locker room and then we surface it like that's the end-all, be-all. That locker room is only an extension of that front office. And so that front office was in a lot of turmoil when Jamie Roos left, when everybody was getting fired, everything was going on. And it seemed like Cal was just, I'm sticking on with my boy Jack Easterby for whatever reason. We talked about it in the past, how Jack may be a confidant for Cal McNair because of all the people he had lost in that short amount of time, whether it was his father, a family friend being thrown into the fire like this. Janice is saying, hey, I need for you to do this. And so you're going to look at a lot of different reasons, but this is still, I think, a 60-40 situation because at the end of the day, Deshaun Watson still allegedly put himself in this situation that he's going through right now. And if he wasn't in this situation right now, best believe he would be off this team. Houston would have gotten a haul back for Deshaun Watson maybe a little bit before this year's draft or for next year's draft. He's still in limbo land. I semi-agree with your situation, with your comment. We are Texans Red Nation, but there are so many more things behind the scenes that we're not discussing right now. And so maybe in due time, a lot of these informations that we have will unfold, but to play the blame game, I think it goes a little bit down the middle edge, more over to the Texans side. We're back and better than ever. All eyes are on the gridiron as teams are back on the football field for another season. As always, BetOnline is your number one spot for all of pro and college football action this season. Go UT. With a new updated site interface, even more odds, props, and contests, BetOnline continues to be the number one source for everything football. So head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Don't forget to use promo code LOCKEDON to receive your bonus. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all of your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts.
All righty, Texans fans. As I alluded to early on in the show, we got our guy, Mr. Brandon K. Scott from Sports Radio 610. Brandon, what's going on, man?
Oh, man, not too much, man. I'm just excited for this weekend coming up. The Texans, quiet as kept with the Texans and the Colts both being pretty bad this year, or at least starting the season off 1-4. This is the Texans' arch nemesis. Make no mistake about it. This is their main rivalry. So, I'm actually excited to see what's in store this weekend for these two teams who have not gotten off to a good start to the season.
Yeah, both of these teams are sitting at 1-4. And of course, before we close out this latest installment of Locked On Texans, we're going to get into that. But Brandon, man, I got to ask you, let's get your segment kicked off. 3 games under center as the starter now. What have been your impressions about rookie quarterback Davis Mills? And I do want to mention, I don't know if you've been listening to Locked On Texans this past week, but here on Locked On Texans and along with my writing at USA Today Texans Wire, Davis Mills has been arguably the best rookie quarterback in 2 of the last 3 weeks. Of course, you got to take out that game against the Buffalo Bills. What has been your impression about Mills so far?
I'm trying to figure out why you got to take out that game against the Buffalo Bills.
Because it was that bad. Plus, he was going up against arguably the best team in football right now.
I think that all of it matters, though. You don't get to just pick and choose what the parts that you like and throw out the parts that you don't like. All of it happened. And I think he's been fine. When you say that he's been, the top 2 rookies or and what have you, that is not necessarily a glowing endorsement for Davis Mills if you consider that the rookies have just flat out not been very good. Now, that's also not to discredit Davis Mills. I think that he has shown some flashes. He has shown you that he can at least lead the offense, that he can make these throws. The issue with Davis Mills is that he's been inconsistent at times in the throws that he makes and his decision making. What stood out to me in the bounce back game against the Patriots, if you will, is that his decision making was a lot better. It seemed like a cliche when you say, hey, I'm just going to focus on taking care of the ball and not turning the ball over. Well, you can say that against the Bills and it not really matter. Like, he could have not turned the ball over. He could have not thrown 4 interceptions and they still would have lost. Maybe if it's not 40-0, whatever the score is, they weren't going to win that game. But not turning the ball over is the difference between being competitive and not in a game against a team like the New England Patriots, which is what you saw them having a chance to win the game because Davis Mills was very good. I'm not going to sit here and discredit after what we saw what we saw. I mean, it's on tape. You can go back and just watch the game. He was pretty good. What I don't want to do is overstate how good he was just because the rest of the rookies aren't doing very well or just because he looked so bad in the game before. So I think there's still a lot there that needs to be obviously developed. He's not starting quarterback level kind of guy yet. I don't see it. And I agree with David Culley when he says that Tyrod Taylor should be the starting quarterback when he's healthy. I'm on the Tyrod Taylor side of things until I see a lot more from Davis Mills.
And I am too. I'm actually hoping that Tyrod do come back and be the starting quarterback whenever he comes back from this hamstring injury. However, on the flip side of that, I'm also looking at this from a standpoint of what are the Texans going to be when Tyrod Taylor comes out? Because first and foremost, he was supposed to come back for this upcoming game against the Indianapolis Colts. And according to David Culley on Wednesday, Tyrod is not ready. So you're looking at a situation where we could go another 2 to 3 games without seeing Tyrod Taylor. And look, I'm saying that this next game against the Indianapolis Colts is a must win because your next 2 is against the Arizona Cardinals and the Los Angeles Rams. And without Laremy Tunsil protecting his left side, I think things could get really bad for Davis Mills. However, when I look at Davis Mills, when I look at everything he has done since taking over for Tyrod Taylor in the second half of that game against the Cleveland Browns, me saying he has been the best rookie quarterback, I know some people might consider that as like an overstatement, but when you take a look at the way he has played, when you take a look at his numbers, and by the way, his numbers has been better than all the other rookie quarterback, I just feel personally that it's showing that Davis Mills has some type of promise when you compare his play so far and the likes of Zach Wilson and Trevor Lawrence and who else been starting since day one, Mac Jones. And by the way, the one-on-one, the head-to-head battle, he did outplay Mac Jones Sunday. It's just unfortunate that Jones had a better coach that helped him win the game.
Oh, you're not going to get no arguments there. The Texas coaching staff definitely got out coached, and I do think that you could make the case, and the numbers there in the tape will show that Davis Mills did outplay Mac Jones. Look, I'm not arguing that he's not one of the better rookie quarterbacks right now. I think that has shown itself. I just don't think that in and of itself is like what. So if he's one of the better rookie quarterbacks, what exactly does that mean? What does that say? Okay, does that mean that he's better than Tyrod Taylor? Does that mean that he's a better option? Look, there are a number of different ways we can look at this, Cody, right? You can look at it from a team development standpoint. What is the smartest strategy from a team development standpoint and how you handle this quarterback situation? It's probably especially if you're 1-6, or 2-5 or whatever it is, when Tyrod Taylor comes back, what's the smartest strategy from a team development standpoint to approach this thing? It's probably to just allow Davis Mills to absorb this experience and to find out what you have in Davis Mills. Now, I don't subscribe to the idea that, we talked about this before, that you need to find out what you have in Davis Mills to decide whether or not you're going to draft a quarterback next year. or the year after that. I think you need to do that anyway if you find a quarterback that you like. And if you don't have to reach for one. But it ain't going to be Davis Mills to be the reason why you don't draft a quarterback. But while you're in the moment and while you have this opportunity with Davis Mills, and if Tyrod Taylor is not ready, you can go ahead and continue to develop Davis Mills. That seems to make sense. But when you look at it from like the interpersonal standpoint and from a competitive standpoint, Tyrod Taylor is the better player. And if sports
I agree.
And if sports is supposed to be a meritocracy, and maybe I'm a little naive for thinking about it this way, but if sports is supposed to be a meritocracy, I think that the better player is supposed to play. This is not about not losing your job to injury. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not saying that Tyrod Taylor is too good or above losing his job to injury, because I mean, it's happened the last few years anyway. I'm saying that if the player behind him is not a better player, then he deserves to play. He should play. I think you owe that to the player, and just from an honesty and an integrity standpoint, you should play the best players. So it not getting into the politics and the armchair GM strategy of how should you develop a team and how should you develop a quarterback, just from a competitive standpoint and who's the better player. I think that Tyrod Taylor should be the guy. That's not a knock on Davis Mills. He's been fine. And look, the New England game, very encouraging after what you saw against the Bills. So that's something to build on. And that's another reason why watching him go, on another road game against a rival, against an Indianapolis Colts defense that has a good defensive front, you want to see what does it look like in the next week.
What I would say, I do agree that Tyrod is still the better player and still the better quarterback. And look, the Houston Texans are sitting at 1-4 entering week 6. And if Tyrod doesn't get hurt, I do believe we'd be looking at a team with a winning record as of right now. But Brandon, really quick before we start talking about Sunday's game, it seems like every single week the Houston Texans, it's this growing disconnect between them and the player. The last time you was on this show, we were talking about what was going on between the Texans and Zach Cunningham. Now, this whole entire week has been extremely weird, given everything that's going on with Charles Omenihu. What has been your takeaway about the drama that's unfolding there?
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's unfortunate you got a disconnect between the organization and a player. I'm not, in a position to place blame. I don't know enough to place blame or say who's the problem, in which situation, in which scenario. But the bottom line is that you have a plus player, a good player who was inactive last week, and in some ways, in vague and odd terms, seems to be at odds with the coaching staff. And some of the things that stand out to me when you hear the coaches talk about Charles Omenihu is that they talk about practice, and Nick Caserio mentioned when he was on with Payne and Pendergast on Sports Radio 610 earlier in the week, his response when asked directly, what does Charles Omenihu need to do to be active on game days? He said that no one is entitled to such and such, whatever he said. No one's entitled to basically playing or a job or whatever it is, and spoke of, used the word entitled. I did see that. So those things stood out to me. It makes me wonder what exactly is going on. What is the interpersonal issue here that's happening between Charles Omenihu, who again is a good player, and I just got done making the point that the best players, the better players, should be the ones to play. And so Charles Omenihu should be playing, and damn sure shouldn't be inactive on any week. You can remember earlier in the season, whenever that was, whether it was the preseason or whatever week that was, when Charles Omenihu for some reason was like at the end of the depth chart, and it got noticed and picked up and was a conversation piece, and David Culley in a press conference kind of laughed it off and said Charles Omenihu will be playing, will be a big part of of the game plan or whatever it was, and he was and had been. That is a contrast, and wasn't that long ago. That's a stark contrast to where we are right now, talking about, we got to figure out if we're going to play him more inside, and and it matters what you do in practice, and no one's entitled to a job. It's just a real odd a real odd story.
What a great segment with Cody and Brandon K. Scott. Celebrate the freedom of choice with Built Bar. Okay. You got 9 delicious flavors that you can choose from: mint brownie, double chocolate, salted caramel, strawberry, cookies and cream. And they got those limited time flavors as well. Celebrate the freedom of choice. You choose whatever you want. And if you want to kind of pick and choose, go ahead and get that mixed box where you'll get 2 of each of the 9 flavors. Not only are Built Bar flavors the best tasting, but they're healthy too. 17 to 18 grams of protein, only 45 grams and 45 grams of sugar. Only 45 grams of sugar and 45 grams of net carbs. Amazing flavors, all tasty, all healthy. Go to BuiltBar.com, use promo code Locked On, and you'll get 15% off your order. Use promo code Locked On for 15% off at BuiltBar.com. Thanks for making the Locked On Texans your first listen every day. Can't wait to dive into whether we will have a victory Monday or another loss Monday. Now make your second listen to Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson give you the expert NFL analysis in less than 30 minutes. It's free and available on all major platforms, including YouTube.
Eric, but continuing here with this latest installment of Locked On Texans, Brandon, the Houston Texans and the Indianapolis Colts, they are 1-4 entering Sunday's game. How do you see the Texans matching up against Indianapolis?
Well, first off, with Indianapolis, I just think what's interesting about them is that the big thing with them is that they needed the quarterback, and so, last year it was Phillip Rivers, and this year, they did what they felt like they needed to do to go get Carson Wentz, trade to go get Carson Wentz, and that's going to be the answer. It's going to be the reclamation project. And if Carson Wentz can be good, then the Colts can be somebody. They can threaten in the AFC South. They can challenge the Tennessee Titans for, the AFC South title, and that's the only thing that's holding them back. And then lo and behold, you look up, and Carson Wentz actually has been good. Carson Wentz actually has played very well, right? And everything around him that has actually failed him and has failed the Colts. The offensive line has probably not been as good as advertised and has underperformed. Really, health has been a big thing with the Colts, and everybody goes through this, but especially the Colts right now. Injuries have been a problem. Their secondary has been in shambles, and you saw that manifest itself against the Baltimore Ravens the other night, in that collapse. And so I think that the Colts are just really interesting from the standpoint of what their expectations were, where they expected to be strong, and what the question marks were, and how things have sort of flipped on them. And the quarterback that everyone was wondering, is this guy any good still, or and all of these things about Carson Wentz, and he's been far from the problem as far as what's been happening with the Colts. So I just think that's an interesting dynamic from the opponent. As far as the Texans, I look offensively, they're dealing with a really good front seven with what the Colts bring. But we saw, as I just mentioned, that secondary can be exposed. And if Davis Mills is developing the way that you feel like he is, and the way I would even agree that, the improvement that he showed against Bill Belichick, against a Patriots defense, I'd love to see what he could do in his first time against Matt Eberflus, his first time against this really good front seven, and a secondary that, look, they had a backup. Rocky Yassim didn't get to play in that game against the Ravens. Yeah, they had a backup out there who didn't play very well, and I would imagine is going to play against the Texans, but I'm pretty sure it's shown up on this injury report, and so they are banged up. Even if their guys are there and back, you can rest assured that they are not 100%. So I'm interested to see how and if the Texans are able to expose the struggling Colts secondary. So that's the matchup that I'm looking forward to. And then, of course, with the defense going up against Carson Wentz, I credit Lovie Smith for making good, and the players obviously for making good on all this talk about turnovers. And in a week going up against Carson Wentz, when, like I just said, the offensive line has underperformed, and everything around Carson Wentz has seemed to fail him. That running game, I'll say that. If anything that scares me about and what would worry me about this game for any Texans fan is just watching those running backs. Watching those running backs are just something I don't want to deal with between Jonathan Taylor and Nyheim Hines. That is what worries me more than anything, because those guys are electric. But as far as the defense and their nose for the ball, and like, how about Terrence Mitchell stripping that ball at the goal line against the Patriots? And Lonnie Johnson having picks in a couple of games, and just all the turnovers. Making good on that. And making that like a legitimate part of their identity, their defensive identity. You look at the offense and what they said they would be, what their identity would be. They said they would run the ball. They said they would be physical, kind of a smash mouth mentality and approach. And it just hasn't been that. Not that they haven't tried. It just hasn't been that. It just has not worked out offensively. So they have not been, the offense has not been what they told us that it would be. But the defense has. And I can respect that. And so I'm interested to see how that plays out against Carson Wentz and the Colts.
You said something I want to go back to really quick. You said that you believe that the matchup, the favor the Texans can actually have is if Davis Mills is able to exploit the weakened secondary that the Indianapolis Colts have. And I do agree with that statement. But my only issue is I don't know if he's going to have the time to do it. And I say that because on yesterday, Laramie Tunsil underwent the surgery on his injured thumb, and he's going to be out for the next 4 to 6 weeks. Brandon, how much do you see Laramie Tunsil not being a part of that offensive line? How much you think that is actually going to hurt the Houston Texans more so than what we can see on the surface?
Yeah, well, I think what you see on the surface is what it is. It's that, on that left side, he is elite. He is an elite left tackle. And so you're replacing him with Geron Christian, who is not elite, but is adequate, has started games. And in the limited action that we've seen of him, is again, not great, but adequate out there. So look, I think that you are going to notice the difference. But overall, the offensive line and Laramie Tunsil has been a big part of what I'm going to say here. But overall, the offensive line has been pretty good in pass pro. The running backs, the one thing you can say about them, I know that they haven't run the ball very well. But one of the reasons why they have so many veteran running backs and what you can say specifically about the ones that they have is that they're good in pass pro. I'm not as worried about them in pass pro and being able to protect Davis Mills as I am Davis Mills continuing to make good decisions and not try to force balls and not be fooled by whatever Matt Eberflus might throw out there. And again, can he take advantage of this secondary that is in shambles? So look, I think that he'll have time. I think that one of the big things, you're talking about having time, taking shots downfield. One of the big parts of the offense, I'm pretty sure, is going to also be, getting some of the quick game going and some of the shorter throws as well to get the offense into a rhythm. And try to get the defense off balance. So I think that play calling will have a little bit to do with it when Davis Mills will have his opportunities. But yeah, obviously losing Laramie Tunsil, and switching somebody else in there is an obvious downgrade. Now, the interesting thing, Cody, since you bring it up, and what I would like to see personally is Titus Howard move over to left tackle and see just what does that look like, and figure out the guard spot with somebody that just want to go in there and be nasty. Just pull another offensive lineman out there and let him go in there and be nasty and be a guard, and let let Titus Howard be more of the athlete that he is. I'm not saying he's not the athlete that Laramie Tunsil is. Don't get it confused. But I mean, we saw some flashes from him last year, you know, in the time that he played, you know, at right tackle. And I know one of the issues for a lot of the people who had problem with the Laramie Tunsil trade was the idea and the possibility that maybe Titus Howard could have been your left tackle all along, the guy that you had just drafted before you made that trade, and maybe that was your franchise left tackle, or just an adequate left tackle. You know, one thing that, you know, I've heard players say before about that position is that you don't need an all-pro, you know, a Pro Bowl level left tackle necessarily. It's great to have one. You probably prefer one, but really you just need an adequate left tackle. And I think that Titus Howard could be that. And so they have said already that they're not doing that. And, you know, so I'm just throwing that out there as something that I would like to see. But yeah, losing Laramie Tunsil is a big deal.
Brandon, really quick, how important will this game be on Sunday? Because like I alluded to earlier, they're 1-4. If they win this game, it could give them some type of momentum, but they 1-4 on a 4-game losing streak. And the next 2 games, especially the one next week against Arizona, is going to be it's going to be tough for the team, especially considering that 9 times out of 10, Tyrod Taylor is not going to be back there on the center for this organization.
Yeah, so in the grand scheme of things, this isn't a team that's going to win a lot of games this year. So, so how important is it really? Probably not all that important, but in the moment, and I do believe in the moment and living in the moment. I do think that there is some importance to it from the standpoint of you've lost 4 straight. One of those, you know, so let's just take the last 2. One of those was in an embarrassing fashion where you lost 40-0, albeit to maybe the best team in football, but that still happened. And then the most recent loss was one that you felt like you should have won, one that you felt like got away from you. And so from that standpoint, just sort of bouncing back and kind of getting that bitter taste out of your mouth of losing, and just to stop losing so doggone much, I think it's a big deal, you know, from a morale standpoint and from a competitive standpoint. I mentioned earlier that this is the arch nemesis. This is a huge rival. All of these players are new and probably have no real connection to the Texans Colts rivalry and whatever that is. Most of them probably don't really care about that, you know, but that matters, I think, to the fans. And then again, both of the teams being bad, that is, again, an unusual part of this rivalry. Normally, at least one of the 2 teams are good. Normally, it's the Colts for sure. But never are they both this bad. I feel rarely. I think it's happened before, but rarely are they both this bad. So that is another piece of it where you got this desperation from both fan bases, from both teams, of wanting to get that bitter taste out of their mouth. We just talked about what happened with the Colts, letting one get away, but in front of an even bigger audience, right? A primetime audience, a collapse, you know, that the world saw. So, you know, I think the game is big from that standpoint, just from in the moment of both teams, you know, really probably trying to want to bounce back. But, you know, for the Texans, you know, I don't like this. I don't like that fans and media view the game this way, and I don't like this part of the process. But it is true that, you know, it is only so much about winning the games right now and the wins and losses right now. So, you know, do you come in on Monday irate about the Texans losing to the Colts on the road with this team? Probably not. If there are some specifics in the game, some coaching, some game mismanagement, some coaching decisions that are questionable, some plays that are questionable, penalties, all sorts of talking points that can come from a game. You can come in and break those down, but in the grand scheme of things, if they lose, are you that upset? Does it? How much does it matter? I mean, you know.
Really quick, Brandon, can I get a score prediction from you?
Yeah, let's go. Colts 30, Texans 13. 30-13.
That's a pretty ugly, lopsided score.
Hey, you hate it when I do that too. Yeah, I got them covering the spread and plus some. So I think what is this, a 9? I think this is a 9.5 spread. So yeah, that is probably harsh a little bit, but hey, but I've had some pretty bad scores already. I'm pretty bad on scores so far. So we'll see if I'm any closer on this one.
Mr. Brandon K. Scott from Sports Radio 610. Brandon, really quick, where can our listeners and the viewers follow you at on social media?
Yeah, man, just follow me at Brandon K. Scott on Twitter. I'm at B Scott from Hiram Clark on Instagram. You can also follow Sports Radio 610 on all the social media platforms because I'm doing that too. And subscribe to the B Block podcast because if you like and listen to this one, then you'll like that one too. So those are all the places where you can find me.
And as always, I'm your host, Cody Davis. Please remember to follow me on Twitter at Cody Davis _24. Once again, it's Cody, COTYDAVIS _24. And please be sure to follow the Locked On Texans page on Twitter at Locked On Texans. And of course, my co-host, Mr. John, Some Sports Guy Hickman at Some Sports Guy with not one, but 2 Y's at the end. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.